In case you live under a rock, there have been reports of a possible serial killer or cabal of serial killers running around Austin, Texas, murdering people who are unsuspecting. All of the victims fit similar profiles. They're typically men between the ages of 25 and 45, and they turn up dead in Lady Bird Lake, which is just steps from Rainy Street and 6th Street, two of Austin's top tourist destinations. Some of the victims have been Austin locals, others have been just visiting for the weekend. But one thing is for sure, not all of these deaths are accidents. And I've been fascinated by this since this first came across my radar. Okay. I have a series called Spooky Scary Storytime where I share listeners' true, allegedly true, most unbelievable, creepiest stories. And it was after I got a story about someone who believed they encountered the Lady Bird Lake serial killer and was followed to their car by said person that I started asking for more tips and getting more. This case kind of reminds me of Luca Magnotta, who is covered in the Netflix documentary Don't F with Cats. Luca Magnotta was a Canadian resident who was posting videos of his crimes online, and it was literally internet sleuths in a Facebook group that came together and eventually were able to piece together some seemingly unrelated things in his videos and eventually got him convicted. I think there needs to be more people talking about what's going on in Austin because as of right now, the police, ADP, does not admit that there is a serial killer. The large majority of these deaths have been ruled accidental drownings after intoxication. The thing is, a lot of these victims have had no more than one or two drinks before disappearing from the people or person they were with and never being seen again until their bodies were found. It's sad, it's tragic. There have been dozens of bodies since 2018, and there were others before then, but 2018 is really when the bodies started tallying up. And a lot of the families of the victims still have no answers and are still looking for closure and for justice for their loved ones. From 2023 till now, there were over 20. That's too many. My fear is if this doesn't get solved, this doesn't get talked about, then the person responsible or people responsible will continue this pattern and more men will be found deceased in Lady Bird Lake. So in this video, I'm going to share some stories and possible tips that I've received. I don't know if they're all related, but I feel like no detail is too small because if the media and the police aren't going to take this seriously, then I think we need to do it. And I know that there's people who are heavily invested in this case. So I'm putting these stories here for posterity. Take what seems to make sense and leave the rest. But maybe some dots will connect for someone out there. Maybe one of these stories will remind somebody of something that they experienced or a person they know. But I think there's definitely something going on. And I'll get a little bit more into my theories a little bit later in this video. For now, here's the first video I posted about this subject. You will hear me censor the word serial killer. That is because I originally posted my content to short form platforms. And unfortunately, those platforms are very strict when it comes to what you can and cannot say. So I use the term waffle unaliver not to be cute, just to get a point across in those videos. So ignore that. And here's that story. People are theorizing that there is a waffle unaliver running around in Austin, Texas since last year. Waffle unaliver is a term I made up to not catch a TikTok charge, but basically 7 people have been found unalived in Lady Bird Lake in Austin, Texas. And officially all of these unalives have been ruled as accidents. But I got an email from a guy I'm gonna call Walter who said he potentially had a run-in with this waffle unaliver. Walter's best friend has some family in Austin and is gonna go to visit. And he asked Walter if he wants to go, and Walter's like, yeah, why not? Like, I love good barbecue. So a few days before they go, Walter finds out about all of these accidents in Lady Bird Lake, but he's like, well, we'll just avoid that area. Towards the end of the trip, Walter and his friend made plans with Walter's friend's cousin to have dinner with her and her husband at this restaurant that they loved and were excited to show off. They look up the restaurant and it's on Lady Bird Lake. It's like a block away, but it's in the same area. But it's Walter's a guy and his friend is a girl. And they're just like, well, we're not exactly easy targets for this waffle unaliver. So they just decide to go anyway. They go, dinner's great. They have some drinks. They're leaving. I don't know what restaurant they went to, but he said it's extremely popular in the area because the food is so good. So when they got there, they actually had to park a few blocks away because it was just popping. They end dinner, say goodbye to Walter's friends' cousins, and they start walking back to the car. At this point, it's dark out, and he said it was very eerie. He said on the entire walk back to the car, he just had this feeling like they were being watched, but they're about 100 feet away from the car, and he hears footsteps on the other side of the street. So he looks over. They don't see anybody because it's dark on that side of the street. There's no street light. So he looks at his friend. He's like, do you hear that? She's like, yeah. They both quicken their pace a little bit to get closer to the car. As soon as they pick up the pace, they hear the footsteps pick up the pace as well from the other side of the street. And this time they're accompanied by like a jingling sound, like somebody has their keys on them. So they look over and they see this extremely tall man come into the light. He says when he says extremely tall, he means extremely tall. This guy was easily 6'5" with long brown hair, a white t-shirt, and then he had like biker style boots on with chains across his heel. Now, not only is he matching their pace, he starts to cut across the street to make contact with them. Walter's friend sees him too, so they both just start running to the car. They're about 25 feet away. They slam the car door, and he says they made it into the car in the nick of time. When he says
it was like the last second he means it, because he looks out, locks the doors, and the man is standing outside of his driver's side window. The man is so tall that as he's standing outside of the driver's side door, all they can see is his chest. So like imagine right here, just a chest. And then the man leans down and smiles at them through the window. Walter's friend is freaking out. She's like, drive, drive. So he puts the keys in the ignition and turns it, starts backing out. And he said what was the creepiest thing was that the smile was not a real smile. It was something sinister. And then as they started backing out of the spot, the man just walked down the street into the darkness. He said it's literally the scariest thing that's ever happened to him. The entire drive back to the hotel was completely silent. And he said he's not saying that this person is responsible absolutely for all of these accidents in the lake, but he can't shake the feeling that if they hadn't been that quick to get back to the car, something more sinister would have happened. Again, officially, all of the accidents there have been just that, accident. But this story came after I posted another story about Austin, Texas, and a lot of people in the comments were talking about this specific thing.
So that story put me on to the idea that the potential killer is maybe above 6 foot with long dark hair. Again, we don't know if this is the same person. This could have just been a deranged person that saw two potentially easy targets to do something evil to and chase them. We don't know if this is actually the person responsible for all the bodies in the lake, but I thought that was interesting in combination with the story that I received after. This person emailed after they had heard that story and said that it reminded them of someone that they had picked up driving late night in an Uber. Here's that story.
Another email from someone who thinks that they may have another piece of the puzzle of what's going on around Lady Bird Lake in Austin, Texas. I've been fascinated by this. I want to put all of these pieces of the puzzle together, even if they're not related. Maybe in putting all these pieces together, someone out there can connect the dots, or maybe something will remind them of an experience that they've had or a person that they know. But this person said that this experience was so severe that they actually talked to the FBI about it. So the FBI already knows about this. This person didn't want his name used, but he said that the video that I posted about this in April about somebody else's experience being stalked to his car by someone in motorcycle boots reminded him of this experience. So he's an Uber driver. He said this happened in September of last year. He picked this guy up at 1:50 a.m. on Gillespie Place. I don't know if that's how you pronounce that street. He said his appearance alone should have made him ignore the ride and continue driving, but this guy walks out from between two houses, like walks out from the shadows, and he said he got the feeling that he did not live in either of these houses. He was about 6'3" with long gangly hair hanging in front of his face, dark hair, and he was carrying a black tote bag and wearing black leather gloves, and he said it was like 90 degrees out. He does have this person's name, which he sent to me, but I'm waiting to hear back from him if he wants me to share that. I don't want to get in the way of an FBI investigation if there is an FBI investigation into this person. The guy gets in the car and sits directly behind him, and he said this sent him into fight or flight mode for whatever reason. He said he immediately felt like he needed to pull the car over and get this guy out of the car, and the ride was only 8 minutes long, but everything this man said during the duration of the ride felt like he was sizing him up. He said he spoke in a very calm, cold, and collected manner as if he had done this before and wanted him to know about it. He asked him things like, do the rides get more dangerous as the night goes on? He asked him if he was a giant, to which he's sitting right behind him. He can clearly see how big he is. The driver responds, I'm about 6 foot. And he says, yeah, I can tell how far the seat is pushed back. The driver responds, you can scoot to the other side, but he didn't. And then the guy says, yeah, I'm 6 foot too, even though he was clearly taller. He then asked, do you use any stimulants to stay awake? Which made the driver feel like he was considering using some type of chemical agent to incapacitate him. And then right before he drops him off, he says, what would you do if you needed to get somebody out of the car but you couldn't? He said where he dropped him off is an apartment building with about 20 complexes, and it's about 100 yards from the lake. That address in the map is separated by the lake only by about 100 yards of woods. He said when he dropped him off, the guy just sat there for about 30 seconds in the backseat of the car in complete silence, and he literally had to reach back and open the door for him. He said when he got out, he now had a smaller bag in his lap in addition to the initial tote bag that he brought in the car. He said he got out and just kind of meandered around the parking lot, and then so he had to do a loop around the apartment complex in order to exit, and when he came back around, the guy was still just wandering around. He has a video of this guy getting out of the car, and he noticed that his shoes are brand new. The laces hadn't even been undone from the knot that you buy them in, which would be the perfect pair of shoes to wear if you were planning on doing something and you needed to dispose of them quickly. He also reverse Google image searched these shoes and was like, these are the shoe, like they're generic, they're cheap. He sent me that video. I don't know if I should post it, like genuinely. I don't want to put somebody on blast that's not involved. But either way, this man sounds like he was trying to terrorize this driver. If you know anything about what's going on in Lady Bird Lake, you know that there's somebody running around and there's a lot of bodies turning up, and I want to get to the bottom of it. So if you know anything, if you know anybody that thinks they know anything, send me any details. No detail is too small.
That said, I think I've decided for now to not share those videos. I don't want this to turn into a witch hunt for the person that was in those videos in case it wasn't him or he wasn't involved, and in case he just wanted to terrorize his driver for whatever reason. That said, I did send those videos and his name to the first person who emailed the story. And I said, does this person look like who you saw. And that person responded and said they fit the same height and their facial features look the same. However, this person in the video is a lot more jacked, as in built, than the person that I saw. The person that I saw was very skinny and lanky. So unless this person started a very strict gym routine after we saw them and after he stalked us to our car, I don't think it's the same person. But both of these stories identified a man over 6 foot tall with long dark hair. This next story I received in between those two stories, and this came actually from a woman. And there have not been a lot of female victims found in Lady Bird Lake, but I don't want to discredit that entirely. This story came from a woman who said she was attending a conference in Austin and she was picked up by an unsettling driver. Here is her story. I had a true story submission about a very unsettling Lyft ride in Austin, Texas that may or may not be related to the unalivings happening around Lady Bird Lake. Now, if you're new here, I have a series called Spooky Scary Storytime where I share listeners' true stories about their most unbelievable encounters. But a few months ago, I got a story about someone who encountered a very strange man around Lady Bird Lake, and that's what initially caught my attention with all of these unalivings happening around Lady Bird Lake. I believe that there is a waffle unaliver. I don't say that to be cute. I say it to avoid censorship. And a lot of other people think that there is somebody or a group of people that are targeting these individuals. All of these deaths, despite a lot of mysterious circumstances, have been ruled accidental drownings by APD. But I don't think they're all accidental. Maybe some, but I don't think all of them are accidental. And so that's why I've been encouraging people to send me anything weird that's ever happened to them around. So maybe we can put some pieces together if these concerns are not being taken seriously elsewhere. And this email came last night after 2 more people have been found in Austin over the last week. Whether this is related, I don't know, but I'm just putting this here for posterity so there's a record of it somewhere. A woman named Karen emailed and said last year she was attending a conference in Austin, Texas. She and a coworker were standing outside of their hotel. They ordered a Lyft on Karen's phone. Lyft matched her with a driver. It was a woman. It showed her on the app progressing toward the hotel. The app alerted Karen that the driver had arrived, but Karen looked, she didn't see the car. The valet driver came over and asked if anyone was waiting for a black SUV. Karen said, I am. The valet attendant said, oh, they're parked on the street. They don't want to come in the line. Apparently there was a line of cars in front of the hotel instructing riders to get in and out of their cars. The valet attendant said that he had instructed the driver to join the rideshare line and the driver refused. Karen said, it's no big deal. We'll walk toward the car. At that point, another of Karen's coworkers came outside the hotel and said, oh, can I ride with you? And she said, sure. They approached the black SUV. The plates matched. She opens the door and sees it's a man driving the car. The 2 seats in the black SUV, despite it having 2 rows in the very back, were pushed down. So there were only 2 seats in the back and 1 seat in the front. Karen tells her male coworker who joined later to sit in the front with the driver, and she and the initial coworker she was with sat in the row behind the driver in the passenger seat. The driver takes a look at the 2 passengers and doesn't say a word for the entire ride. Karen noticed that he was wearing work gloves, not the kind for driving, but the kind that her dad wore on the ranch that he lived on when doing yard work or moving hay bales. Her coworkers also seemed to notice, but nobody said anything. Karen starts looking around the car and she notices on the seats down behind her, there is plastic and packages of zip ties and nothing else. Upon seeing all of this, Karen said she had an extremely unsettled feeling, but luckily the ride was not long. The driver dropped them off close to the venue. The venue was downtown near Lady Bird Lake. She said that she had a really bad feeling, especially the fact that it wasn't even the driver in the app. She said she knows sometimes people change drivers, but for some reason she just didn't feel right about it. So she reported it to Lyft. Lyft said that they were investigating, but they just said that they will never match her with that driver specifically again. Luckily, nothing bad happened to them, but she said when she thinks about it, she still feels uneasy. And now that she's seeing all these stories about the bodies found at Lady Bird Lake, she can't help but wonder if it's possibly related. The body count at Lady Bird Lake is in the 20s over the last 2 years alone. There have been many more since 2017, 2018. And I've said it before, but I'll say it again. Unless something happens, whether it's increased surveillance, increased police presence, this will continue happening. And so do you see this pattern that I'm noticing? Like all of these stories seem to weave together. We have the tall person with long dark hair. We have the rideshare drives. And what is really, really interesting, I think, is that a lot of these victims have no record of being picked up by a rideshare. And one possible theory that I've seen discussed online is that the person who's responsible for these deaths is actually posing as a rideshare driver, picking up the victims, which is why they would never have a log or in their rideshare apps to get back to their hotel. A lot of the victims, unfortunately, were last seen at the same locations or in the same few bars even. And there's some speculation that it's somebody involved with the Austin nightlife scene, a bartender, a bar owner, a bouncer, a DJ that has access to a heavily intoxicated crowd or a crowd that seems to be seeking intoxication while they themselves are sober. Interestingly enough, one of the victims in 2018, Louis Ramirez, who was 37 years old, disappeared after walking back from a DJ gig that he had in downtown Austin. One thing of note here is that he was terribly afraid of water. And so it's interesting because a lot of people are saying, oh, these people must have just gotten intoxicated and wandered down toward the lake and fell in. Why would a person who is terrified of water go down to the water? It just doesn't make any sense, intoxicated or not. And then if you want to get into the blood panels that were done on some of these accidental drowning victims, some of them do show ethanol in the blood, which is metabolized from alcohol. But let's not discredit the fact that a lot of street drugs and street substances are not commonly tested for in drug panels. Further, some street drugs metabolize into ethanol instead of something else. So, in combination with someone who's already been drinking, that's not going to show up. While not all of the stories that I've gotten have been about people's personal experiences, other people who live in the area have weighed in. Here's an email I got from someone I'm just going to leave anonymous. I don't think it's important that her name is shared. But she said, I live roughly 1 hour away from Austin, Texas. A lot of us that live in the area have speculated that there is a bartender on 6th Street that has been drugging these men's drinks. The second part of that is that they are being followed after closing onto a bridge and being pushed off. Every single one of these men has had a very similar story of how their bodies are found in the lake, drowned, supposedly drunk. Thank you for talking about these murders because no one is. It's hard to hear about many wanting to travel to Austin, Texas, but having no awareness of what is actually going on currently. 6th Street is extremely dangerous, and I would highly advise people to stay far, far away until this is resolved. I have been part of one of the Facebook groups that is trying to put together information. And a lot of people in there are local and also believe there's a serial killer. But there's a healthy amount of people, I would say, that also don't believe that there's a serial killer and say that all of these men were just intoxicated and accidentally fell in. Others have even suggested that it may be a cop or somebody on ADP that's involved. To that, I would just argue that ADP probably doesn't want word of a serial killer running around downtown Austin getting out because it hurts tourism. I live in Nashville. We've had a hefty amount of crime and even deaths downtown here, and there's almost no coverage. And I think it's for the same reasons, unfortunately. This is another email I think might be important to share in case it connects some dots or makes sense later with anything else that comes out. This person wants to be anonymous. We'll call her A. And she said, Hi, I briefly dated a man during a very low point in my life. He lives on Lady Bird Lake, and my intuition is certain he has something to do with the killings. She did give me his name. I'm going to leave that out. She said he is 6'4", has a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and he has tried breaking my ankle to ensure I couldn't escape. I am extremely spiritually protected, and my spirit guides were yelling at me to be cautious right before he tried to break my ankle. So luckily, I was hyper aware and yanked it away before he could actually break it. I still couldn't walk for 6 weeks after, though. Everything about that night from the moment I got there was off. I did file a police report, and the cop told me I wasn't the only woman he had harmed. He already had charges against him. I believe mine was the third. I just know in my gut, because of the way everything played out, the eerie vibe of his apartment, the fact that it is literally right on the lake near where the bodies have been found, and his dead eyes and how he tried to hurt me to make sure I wouldn't be able to run away. I know he has something to do with all of these killings. I'm more than happy to share every detail. I just want everyone to know how dangerous this man is. Please, please, please share this story. I don't think he's the only one. I think his friends might be involved in some way. I did email her back. I asked her to share any information that she felt comfortable sharing, and I told her I was sorry for what happened to her. That's completely awful, whether this man is involved or not. But I do think it's interesting that she brought up the fact that he potentially is not acting alone if this was the person, even if it's not. I have considered the fact that there might be a cabal of these people working together. Potentially one incapacitates the victim by use of a substance, another one picks them up, and the third one carries out the murder. Why they're doing it, I don't know, but I've read enough scary story times where I think it could be any number of reasons and potentially reasons that we don't even understand. One thing that I've noticed in these patterns is that a lot of these murders typically happen around holiday weekends. That could mean that the killer is someone who is off work and can come to Austin. Maybe they're not a local. It could also mean that these killings could potentially be ritualistic. I know a lot of people are going to immediately discredit that, but there are groups of people out there who practice things that is way beyond comprehension of the average person. We don't understand why they do it, but it makes sense in their brain. Maybe these men that they're targeting, because they fit a similar profile, maybe these men represent something: power, youth, agility. We don't know. I'm just throwing out theories because I think in something like this, we need to think outside the box. I'll continue coverage on what's going on at Lady Bird Lake because I think we can all agree that there's too many bodies turning up for this to just be a coincidence or a case of a bunch of accidental drownings. There's too many. This doesn't happen the way that it's happening in a normal situation, people getting intoxicated or not. I've been encouraging anybody that's listening to send me any tips or experiences that seem to be relevant. Even if it doesn't seem important enough, even if it doesn't seem like something that you should go to the cops about, I want those pieces of this puzzle because, and by putting all of these pieces on display, maybe somebody somewhere can connect some dots. So if you have a story, if you have an idea, if you have anything that you think you can contribute in a meaningful way, please send it to me. I have a form submission on my website. It's dogoodstaybad.com. You can actually fill it out anonymously if you don't want to be named. Keep these stories coming. I will keep the coverage coming, and no detail is too small.